G'day everyone, this is Ainke here. Welcome to Investor Journeys, where we chat with everyday Aussies and seasoned investors about their property journeys, the wins, the stuff ups and everything in between. Whether they've got one property or a whole portfolio, we dive into how they did it, what they've learned and what their journey's been like so far. No fluff, just real stories from real people. So let's get stuck in. G'day everyone, welcome to the IJ podcast. We've got a very exciting guest today. I've known him personally for a long time. He's a very, very good friend of mine. You know, funny enough, we only really started talking property over the last few years. You know, we talked all this other stuff before that from Auckland, and now he's residing in Sydney. He'll be able to tell you more about his journey soon. Welcome, Kumsy.
Thank you so much, my son. The only thing we're missing is a beer or a Cody.
Yeah, look, that will happen sooner than later, I'm sure. For those who don't know what Cody's is, do you want to give us a quick rundown?
Mate, I think it was back in the days when that was our go-to drink because it was a lot cheaper. And I think we used to get it in 4-pack and there were, 12 percenters? And that used to set us for the night.
Let's just say it was value for money, and that was the start of our investment journey. It's really into those sort of drinks.
The best investment that we could have ever made.
It was certainly a high street drink for a very cheap price. But we've come a long way since then. And look, obviously, you know, for people who are listening in, they'd want to know a bit about your backstory. Do you want to tell us a little bit about where you came from?
Yeah, I mean, my upbringing we came from Sri Lanka. We're born in Sri Lanka and we grew up during the Civil War and stuff. So there was a lot of hard times that we went through. But thankfully, my parents were educated. And in 1988, we were able to leave Sri Lanka. My parents got a job in Oman. We lived in Oman for a few years, 9 years, and then moved to New Zealand in 1996. And yeah, so in terms of my upbringing and stuff, we had to get through. But I think that kind of set me in terms of who I am today, and also being very thankful for my parents. I mean, I wouldn't be here talking to you if not for them. I mean, New Zealand was where everything started in terms of the property journey, but it was like a very volatile share market, my property journey, but I'll disclose all that a bit later.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, that time in our parents' upbringing and bringing us up, you know, we're all around the same age, was an extremely difficult time. And I think most of us, they came overseas to get away from that, really. Otherwise, you know, could be very likely we'd be all living in Sri Lanka right now.
Selling tea and biscuits.
That's it, yeah, in the old tea estates. But no, we are now over here, and, you know, very thankful to all our parents who went through that. So I completely can understand, you know, where you're coming from there. So you've gone over to New Zealand, you've studied there, you know, I'm assuming you've started working there. You know, where did the investment mind come into? Because I know you quite well, and you're quite different to a lot of my friends, you know, in terms of how proactive you are in this space. So where did that all come from?
The first property I bought was actually from my ex-father-in-law. In 2007, 2008, bought a property in Mount Wellington on Barrack Road. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And it was actually a property, you know, back in the days, it was right next to this power station. There was a lot going on, and, you know, I bought it off him, and he probably kind of, you know, initiated or started my property journey. I said, "Hey, uncle, what are you doing on this property?" He's like, "Son, I'm just doing a bit of subdivision on this property." And I was like, "Subdivision? What is that all about?" And he just said, "Yeah, you know, you can subdivide the land, and you can do, you know, you can either build a house in the front or whatever." And then I took on that project. You know, there was no focus of me going, okay, I got to do subdivisions and things like that. So yeah, that subdivided the land. I already had a DA in place. I was working with a surveyor and a town planner. And instead of building a house in the front, I actually relocated a 2-bedroom house on the lot. And I was like, building? I was like, nah, this might be cheaper. And there was no process to it. There's no due diligence and all that. I was like, that's a bit cheaper. Then, yeah, did a bit of extension. And then, yeah, that's actually which initiated or started my property journey with that subdivision. And I knew it was all about that land and something that clicked in my mind too, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like your father-in-law had quite a input there because I don't know many people who would go straight into a subdivision, relocating a house. Most people would just buy a townhouse or unit and live in it, right? So,
Yes.
so that's quite a very different path to most. And how did you have the type of investments at that point in time, at least financial backing to do something like that?
Yeah, so the house I bought was $270,000. So there was already a bit of equity to do the rest of like the subdivision and things, but
Mm,
he had already gone through most of the subdivision work, so I didn't have to put any money into it. So it was almost like we had already the two lots were already the titles were received for those two lots. And then it was always about just pulling the equity. And I didn't know too much about it. I spoke to the bank. They're like, yeah, you got a bit of cash. And I was like, okay. And that's when, I was able to put some cash out and then relocate the house and then do the extension. Um, and then from there, I moved on to another project with my dad. It was right before the 2009 recession. And again, it was just down the road on Barrack Road, 180 Barrack Road. And there was a friend of ours. He's like, oh, I've got a bit of land. Do you guys want to build a house? So we said, yeah, why not? Land was cheap. We started building the house. The recession hit. We had some issues with the builder. We couldn't get the compliance. And my dad was just wanting to get out of it. It was just all too much for him. And we're like, yeah, let's sell the house. And I don't want to push my dad into anything he didn't
mm,
want to do. Sold it. I think if I had kept all these properties, I would, I think I'll be sitting in Sri Lanka or in Bali somewhere, just retired. But you know how the market is going in Auckland. But yeah, we sold that. We didn't make any money. I think we lost about 10 grand or something. And then that was the second project we got onto.
Sounds like a good learning experience. I was just thinking to myself, that's the time that we were connecting up and going out. I wish you put some wisdom onto me at that point in time. I
Man, it
was
was all Codys. We were losing our brain cells, so there was no talk about properties and things at that time.
definitely was not on the radar, I could say, at that
Yeah.
point in time in our lives. But it sounds like you obviously doing things on the side, which is news to me. And then look, that sounds like a great experience that you've gone through. Just going through those things, obviously it didn't work out, but I'm sure you took those learnings to the next few. So after that, your property journey is somewhat good, somewhat bad. What's the next steps
Yes.
for you guys?
After that, we moved to Brisbane, and we started selling the properties in Auckland, the two properties that were subdivided, and brought the cash into Brisbane. The first property we bought was in Carindale, and then we moved on to Corinda, Sunnybank, and then 2014, me and my wife split up and went our own ways. And at that point, there was no animosities or anything like that. We just had our assets, separated the assets, and then went our own ways. So I got two properties out of it, and one was the Corinda and the Sunnybank one. Sold Sunnybank, took some cash out, and I was like, I'm going traveling. I went for 2 years, and all about that journey, and we talk a lot
Mm.
about travel. And I think one of my friends asked me the other day, and he's like, "Man, why did you sell Sunnybank? Like, you should have kept the Sunny." And I was like, "Man, the experience that I got from traveling, and I'm all about people and interaction and just the journey in life. I think it taught me so much about what my values are, what my beliefs are, and it was not about money and making and all that comes a bit later. But for me, like, yeah, it always aligns with my values of what people mean to me. And if you ask me during my travels, what's the best place you went to, or all these Anthony Gaudi churches in Spain and all that, I was like, I saw so many churches, but the people that you meet along this journey, I'll always remember them. So yeah.
Yeah, I think we share a very similar sentiment. We've talked about this many times about traveling and the purpose, I suppose, of why we're here and making
Yes.
sure that we make the most of our lives. I think it's a good point that people are so focused on the journey in terms of making money. They forget to do the other things in terms of what actually means a lot to them outside the work environment and all that kind of thing. But it sounded like you're talking when you're picking up these properties, you're like picking fruit off a tree. You're buying one, you're buying two, you're buying three. Is that all from the cash proceeds of
Hmm.
Auckland?
Yeah, Auckland, and then like in the areas that we bought in Carindale and stuff, we had a bit of equity, and it was the income from my partner and sorry, my
Mm,
ex-wife and myself. So I think we were able to leverage a bit of equity and just move on to a few other things. And these properties were not, not like what it is now. These were in 380,000 for Sunnybank
mm,
properties sitting on a 700 square meter land. The one in Carindale, which is probably valued at 1.2 million. We bought that for like 490,000 back in 2008. And it was a lot easier as well. Back in the days, they were not was not as restricted or in terms of the borrowing capacity and things. The interest rates was a lot higher, but it was a bit easier to borrow cash and move on to these projects. And it was all to do with the equity that we used and a bit of cash that we bought from New Zealand. Yeah.
yeah, got it. I mean, going back that long ago,
Yes.
you can never foresee what you think the Brisbane prices would have done. So I'm sure at that point in time, without knowing the future, those prices were either normal or probably quite expensive. Or at least,
Yes.
whilst the borrowing and the restrictions were a lot easier, it's not like you thought you're getting a massive, massive bargain because you knew what was going to
Mm.
happen in the future.
Yes.
So good on you, for taking action and both of you for making the most of those opportunities. So you've held on to one property from all of that.
Yeah. So I had the one in Corinda. So I think it's a good area now, like in terms of Oxley and Corinda. It's not like how it used to be back in the days. It was on the main street on Oxley Road. And it was a splitter block. Again, my purchases are always around land and what you
Mm,
can do with the land. So splitter block is basically you've got two lots, one title. It's all about just going to the land titles office and either if the property is in the right, it's called a unicorn property. Um, so you can either split the land, the two titles, and you can either build on both or demolish the house. So there's lot of exit strategies that you can do with these. So in 2020 and 2021, when I came back from my travels and I was living here, I was like, man, Brisbane hasn't done anything, like what else can I do? Maybe I'll just go regional. So at that time, yeah, so just go to the existing house. I was all Queenslander and then sold the two lots as is. I actually even sold it on real estate advertising myself. Like, don't ask me why. And but there's always learnings from these processes as well in terms of how do you market it, and too much thought didn't go into a lot of these
mm,
processes. And yeah, so then in 2022, after I sold the second lot in 2021, I bought a property in Toowoomba. Again, it's got it's 1,400 square meters of land. I've got a project running on that now, but the intention at that time was not to, build something, or it was all about, it's got a bit of land, we'll acquire this and see how we go. So I've got a DA on that now, to build 8 two-bedroom villas on that. Had some challenges from the council. But again, it's always about land. How can I add value to it? What else what are my exit strategies to, highest and best use of these pieces of land? Yeah.
yeah, and obviously get either more income or more wealth through selling them in separate entities. I mean, it's again going back to your journey right at the start in Auckland. I mean, that's obviously had a big influence in your mindset because almost every property that you're looking at the moment now is that land component, and nothing's really changed in that process with respect to going to the council, understanding the growth zones and the zone, residential zones essentially.
Yes.
So that's all stayed the same, and you've kept Toowoomba. What did you buy that for?
So that was for 540,000. So it's valued at about 750 now. But once the DA goes through, and if we can get that 8 units on there, then obviously it's called the DA is approved. You in the development term or developers term, you call it a soft equity uplift.
Yeah.
So it'll be valued at whatever it's worth with the DA in place. So that's what I'm hoping for. But it's been a long process. Like Toowoomba City Council has been it's been on the slower side. But yeah, it's you got to be patient with some of these journeys. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure with Toowoomba, I mean, they've had a massive growth spurt over the last little while. You probably got in at the right time, and they're probably not so used to seeing so many, investors
Yeah.
and people like you, looking to develop. So they've probably had a long list on their hands, which they're probably not used to. But you bought that in 2022, so you've got that property solely.
Yes.
What's
Yeah.
next for you after that?
What was next was actually a bit of a learning curve. So I was talking to my girlfriend, my current girlfriend this time. It's like, I think there is something happening in Townsville, and she's not interested in properties. She's very easygoing. She's happy with her coffees in the morning, and so a very simple person. And I was
Mm.
like, I think you got to get in. She just works part-time, and I said, properties are one of these things that, if you make the right move and time the market, I think you can make a bit of cash. And if you don't want to, it's fine as long as the rent covers the mortgage. And somehow I convince her, and we started looking at uh, in Townsville in 2023, towards the end of 2023, and the market was hot. Like
Yep.
it was really hot at that time, and I'm
Hmm.
sure you're aware as well. And it was a very interesting process in terms of actually getting through to these agents and the real estate agents when the market is hot. So I think I spent a good 4 to 5 months just being on the phone with as many, real estate agents as I can, and trying to get through to them. Every property had about, it'll go on the market, I think 24 hours, it was gone. 24 hours, 48 hours. You call them and you're like, nah, we've got an offer on the market. So I built a rapport with one of the agents. She only deals with high-end properties. Um, and I said, look, we've got a pre-approval of 350,000. Have you got anything? She's like, nah, not at the moment. And I kept calling every week. And then she's like, I've got something, you guys might be interested. I said, yeah, how much does a vendor want for it? She's like, 300,000. I was like, can you please send me the video? And she sent it through to me. We looked at it, looked at the photos. We just offered, and it went through. Yeah, that settled Feb 2024. Just got the valuation from my broker. It's valued at 520 now. So that's about 73% in
Yeah,
a year and 4 months. Yeah. So
that's
we
unbelievable.
yeah, so we're pulling the equity out of that and putting a granny flat. That's all. I think I had a chat to you about that. In terms of the yield, once a granny flat is in place, probably about the 13%, 14%, the front and the back granny flat. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, look, obviously we were very active in Townsville. I think a lot of people know that for our clients in 2023, even 2024, even to this day. I mean, there are certain markets in Townsville which has, performed well, but there's still a lot of uplift to go in certain areas.
Mhm.
And so the demand and, just from an economic perspective, it's done very well. So you've obviously got in at a great time with that 300K.
Yeah.
I dare say that's probably well and truly gone, even for units probably these days. But 520, I'm sure that's going to go keep uplifting as well.
Yes.
I think an important point is that some people who don't know investing very well, who live in Sydney, for example, might say, "Oh, 200K, that's probably what Sydney does in a year or
Yeah.
2 years." But I think that the biggest point about all of this is that you can buy these things at affordable prices and hold on to them. It's
Yes.
not like you're buying $1.5 million properties which go up by that much, and you're having to scramble to keep the cash flow. It's manageable to be able to hold that property, gain that much equity, and then go again or build granny flats. Your yields are much higher as well. So you can't really compare, a Sydney versus a Townsville, for example, based on the ability to hold. And multiple properties. So I think that's very important for the listeners to know. So you've gone into Townsville, you got that one, you've got your Toowoomba one, you're doing pretty well because both are going skyrocketing at the moment.
Yes. That's
What's
actually
next?
Paulina's. Yeah, that's my girlfriend's property. But
Yep,
yeah, I was just sharing the journey in terms
sure.
of what we went through to get the property in terms of, almost like being a buyer's agent to
Mm.
to 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 go through this process. That
Can
but it
I
was such a
can I ask, so out of, because you're working full time,
Yeah.
and to be able to call that many agents for that long, did you have to take much time out of your day to do that?
No, I think I would probably set aside, I've got my 1 hour lunch and then, or you finish early at 4 o'clock or you get, your breaks and stuff. So I think probably being on the phone a day, probably an hour a day or hour and a bit a day to make sure that you make these calls and you're actually consistent with it and you're building a rapport with these agents who actually don't have much time. Like when
Mm,
the market is so hot, all they want to do is, and some of them you don't even get a call back. You just
yeah.
like they'll just send you a form. They're like, if you want to put an offer in, it's
Yep.
multiple offers, best dress,
Best offer. Yep.
best offers. So yeah, so I think it was really interesting, and that was probably the first time I had to go through this exercise.
Hmm.
And but I thoroughly enjoyed it in terms of just to look back at that year and 5 months ago to where we are now with that, and to pull the equity out in that short period of time to come up with this granny flat is yeah, I think yeah.
On a winning note for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, look, we got together, over the last couple of years, and we shared agents that we know quite well. For example, Taylor from
yeah,
Old Ray White, wherever was there.
yes,
Shout out to Taylor. Good looking rooster, that guy.
yes.
But
All
yeah,
Kiwis are, mate.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So you've got those properties, and are you sticking in Townsville again? What's next?
Yeah. So 2024, acquired 2 properties, and I think one of them is a banger, mate. I think you gotta come in and tell all the story in terms of. So the first one was in Gulliver, and that was through you. And I think we got to share the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I only just remembered that when you just said it now, actually. But that property was probably one of the deals of the year for me, I'd say. Now, what happened was we had a chat overseas. You obviously came to my 40th, and we were having a good chat about property. And I said, look, yeah, we both seem to be in the same area. And you said, sort of, this is what I look for. So I said, okay, look, what I'll do, outside if my clients don't want it, if I find something, we'll have a chat. So we got back, and I was having a chat with a property agent, and they said, "Look, I know a guy who is looking to sell. There's no agent involved. Do you want to talk to him directly?" And this is through a property manager. So I said, "Yeah, yeah, absolutely." And she told me the address. It fit what you were looking for, over 800 square meters.
Yeah.
And so I contacted the guy, and he's quite an elderly man. And I was also in touch with his daughter, who was sort of representing him because he wasn't quite in the right health condition. And I said to her, what are you after? And I was sort of thinking, I'll be glad to get something, around 350, 400, that sort of price range would be a good deal based on that kind of land size, right? And she goes, oh, I think he's after about $220,000. And is this just the land, or is this for the land and the house? And I
Yeah.
couldn't believe it. And I said to her, look, let me put it to the buyer, and let me come back to you. And I said, obviously it was probably a 10-second conversation. And she goes, and I said back to her, yeah, no, absolutely interested. We couldn't believe it. And she goes, oh, look, my dad, I had a chat back to my dad, and I think he might be wanting, now around 250. And I said, yeah, even at that price, it was just unbelievable, right? So I just said straight away, we'll take it. And we got this property for, was it 250? Was it the price?
250.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and I said, look, obviously we're going to have to do a building and pest. And she said, look, just beware, it's not in great condition. So,
Yeah.
obviously, it's all relative. If there's going to be some major issues in terms of this house, and it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, then understand why it's priced that way. But I said more than
Yes.
likely it'll be fine. So we did the building and pest. It wasn't in great condition. I do recall there's quite a few
Yes.
things wrong with it.
Yes.
Pests got involved. The roof needed fixing. Obviously internally needs a reno, but that's what you were after essentially anyway. And at that price, we just couldn't say no. So that was an unbelievable purchase at
Yeah.
$250,000 on an 800 square meter block. And this was last year. So
This was last year.
end of last year, when Townsville had already gone bananas. And we got that price.
Yeah.
Everyone was happy because they don't have to go through a selling agent and cause stress for the from the owner, and you were able to get a massive deal. So that was it's just so funny how things happen, because we just chatted the month before,
Yes.
and you weren't even a client of ours, and then suddenly we've got this property for you.
Yeah. Right. Thank you so much. I think, just to go back in terms of how it all came about for me wanting to purchase that property, because I was like, I had a bit of cash in my super, and I was actually calling a few of these SMSF advisors and things, and the number when you talk to these guys is like, oh, you need $200,000, in your balance, otherwise it's going to be a risk in terms of setting it up and investing with your super. And I always had this 200,000 in my mind, and I didn't have 200,000 in my super balance. And I was like, man, there's got to be a way. Like, why it's just sitting there earning 4% from an industry fund. I was like, I got to do something else with it. And then I think I spoke to a broker, and they said, yeah, this is how much you can borrow. I think it was up to 500 or something along those lines, and I had enough for a deposit. And I was like, oh, so it can be done. And and that's exact. So I think the whole process of setting up the trust and the bear trust and the SMSF trust, it takes about good 2 months. And when I was in the process of getting all that done and almost we're ready to go, that's when we started talking. I was like, bro, let's go. And, and obviously, you talk about timing the market. This is like timing a deal of the century to go. My SMSF is set up. I didn't think that I could invest through my SMSF like a few months ago, but I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to trust in my, my due diligence process to go, it is possible. And we pulled the plug. I think, it was settled in 2020, end of 2024.
Yeah.
Spent about 47K in renos. It's rented at $500 a week now. And again, got my broker to value it. The bank valuation came at 520, about 73% or 75% in terms of the gains.
So you spent
yeah.
50K and you've gained over $250,000.
Yeah.
So that just shows you what kind of deal this was. And look, I'll be honest. I think if it was a novice investor, who, maybe didn't know the market and just saw those kind of issues with the building invest, they would have freaked out and they would have said, perhaps no. But you've got the experience, you had the knowledge, it was just being at the right place at the right time with us two having a chat. And who would have thought that you would have got a deal like that?
Yeah. And also, like, obviously you hear the stories, the stories in terms of how you made the uplift. But I think there's a lot that goes on in the background. Obviously, I had some issues with the tradies and, lost a bit of cash through that. But that's on another project, but it was the same tradie. But, and you had some hard times through these and this is a journey. This is not for everybody, like renovations and, in terms of acquiring these sort of properties and projects. It's not for everybody, but I think I just didn't want to let it go at that price. Number one. Number two, it was like, renos, all right, let's give it a go. And I went through a few tradies, but yeah, it all worked out in the end. I still have my necklace. There's a bit of paint on one of my things, my pendants. And I was like, this is when I was, buffing these floors and sanding things down and, working with tradies. I was like, I'm not going to take this off because that'll be a memorabilia for me to remember these hard times that you go through, because it's not always glory. You have to remember these journeys that you're willing to take to whatever this journey takes you.
Yeah, good. A lot of short-term pain for long-term gain, essentially.
Yeah.
And you had to battle the weather as well. Yeah. Up there was a lot of downpours during that time, which obviously deteriorated that house as well. So, look, at the end of the day, it was just the right property for you, I think, and obviously any others who are more experienced in this game. Yeah. So, I'm so glad that we were able to get you that deal and get that kind of uplift. So So now it's valued at that much. Have you taken the equity out of that to go again, or did you just go again on another purchase?
No, because it's under the self-managed super
Oh,
fund,
yes,
you
of
can't
course.
use the equity.
Correct.
Yeah, so
Yes.
it's just the long-term
Yep.
growth. I'm not putting any cash into it. It's yielding. As I said, I've got I think 200,000 loan left on it, and renting at $500 a week. So I'm just going to let that ride for a bit. And I think for a while, yeah, I don't have to put any cash into it
Because you were looking to do something with that property, I remember. But I think when you did the renovation, you got the rent at
Yeah.
that price, and you
Yes.
just said to yourself, you don't need to do anything because
No.
your yield is such a good yield.
That's right. I mean, I always because the 8 or 9 square meters, again, looking into subdivisions and things. I mean, this is very tight in terms of the location of the house on the land. But maybe you can put a granny flat. But for now, I don't have to worry about it. I don't need. It will just ride the wave now. Yeah.
Cool, fantastic. So you've got that in your SMSF, and did you purchase any more during that time?
Yeah. So another one in Townsville as well, in Cranbrook. And that was purely because now I want to enter the phase of passive income. I've always looked at a rooming accommodation. So it's basically, I'm sure a lot of them might know, it's just a house. It's got five rooms, 5 en suites, and they can be rented individually. And because of the vacancy rate, I always wanted to build one of these. I've been looking at this for like a few years. But in terms of the cost of land, it didn't make sense for me in terms of other regional places, and also a lot of council rules and regulations around it. And it's a new product in Townsville at the moment. And I was like, I was again looking for a bigger piece of block to subdivide. So the one in Cranbrook is 8 or 9 square meters. So I've got a subdivision in place. It's already approved, just waiting on some civil works to get that in terms of the sewer and stuff, operational work, sorry. And then once the subdivision is done, to build a rooming accommodation at the back, maybe to sell the front, but I'll see if I can keep them both. But yeah, that'll be the journey. That'll be the start of my journey in terms of passive income through, these yield at 13, 14%. And recently there was one of them, a developer of mine who recently completed one of these projects, and I think it was sold for rented at $2,100 for these 5 rooms, very close to the city, and it just went under contract for 1.2 mil. Yeah. So yeah. So yeah.
I know you've been talking to a lot of town planners and all that kind of thing up front. Like, it's not like you just buy this property and off you go. Like, there's a lot of hard work in the background before you even, buy the property in terms of due diligence. Just for the listeners, rooming is quite a new concept for a lot of people. And so with your particular property, I don't know if you know off the top of your head or if you've done any feasos, but do you know how much it would cost at the end of the day to build this X amount of units and how much rent you would expect?
Yeah. So at the moment, hopefully, if the subdivision is completed and if I sell the property in the front, I should be able to get that piece of land for about $100,000, $150,000 around then. I'm just working on some numbers in terms of it's very hard to find the right tradies to do all these operational works, and the main things is a sewer line that I've got to complete as part of the EDA. The build cost is around the 540 to 570 mark, and it can be rented, I would say, around the $2,000 mark per week for those 5 rooms. And as I said, because of the low vacancy rate, these things are getting filled. There are a few developers now doing this in Townsville, and we had a chat to Townsville as well in terms of infrastructure charges to see if they can waive that. That's in process at the moment. But even with the infrastructure charges, when you can rent it for $2,000 or $1,900 for that product, and because I was able to do that subdivision and get the uplift in terms of the cost of land, it makes it a viable project.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's just talking numbers, that's about 20% yield once you take into account just the build cost. But do you have to put separate meters and firewalls in place for each of those rooms?
So it's classified as a 1B. And there are certain rules and regulations around that, but you don't have to, because sorry, this will actually include your outgoings. So that all the tenants, all they have to do is just bring their blankets. Most of them, sometimes you also have a package where it's fully furnished. So all they have to do is just bring their duvets and they can
Yep.
move in.
Yep.
But your rent actually includes all the outgoings as well. So your power, electricity, you'll have your solar and things. So yeah, as I said, towards it in the end, it'll be around the 14 to 15% yield.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a mini commercial hotel almost.
Yeah, but I think in terms of, because people always look at it as, oh, it's a student accommodation or it's like a hostel kind of setup, but it's not the case. It's a lot of the tenants who are moving into these your working class. A lot of people in a lot of these regional places, you have a lot of overseas migrants, skilled migrants moving into these regional areas, and for them, instead of going and looking at a house, it's actually hard for them to find these houses because they don't have any rental history. It doesn't mean that we're not doing any due diligence before we fill them into these rooms, but it makes it a bit easier for them to move into these, and they're quite comfortable. They're like, okay, for $380, $400, we don't have to pay anything. We don't have to worry about electricity. We don't have to connect everything. So yeah, I think it's a great product in the right areas. I mean, it's been happening in Brisbane for a very long time. So in Townsville, it's a new product. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, you've obviously got a lot of knowledge on this topic, so no doubt that there'll be a few listeners out there who want to reach out to you and ask more questions.
For sure.
But is that the end of your property journey for now?
Yeah, that's the end of. I think I'm going to be busy for a while now with
Yep.
these projects. I mean, once everything kicks off and the build commences.
Yeah. So you're
I think I'll
Toowoomba and you're rooming in town.
Yeah, Toowoomba, rooming, and the granny flat for my
Got it.
girlfriend's property.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's going to happen soon as well. So it'll be 3 projects on the go. So I think I'll be a bit busy with those. Yeah.
Look, it's exciting. I mean, that's just the end product that you want at the end of the day. You've already got the land. So
Yes.
the fact is you can now, maneuver and modify to suit. Obviously, like you just said, you've got to encounter such challenges with tradies and getting the operational and infrastructure into the facilities. But, you can do that at your own pace. You've already got the land at the end of the day. So that's fantastic, mate. I'm really happy for you. And, I can't believe it took so long for us to connect on property at the end of the day because we've been so into it for the last...
Thanks to Vinny.
Yeah, yeah. The last 5-10 years, I couldn't believe it. But, mate, next steps now, we've been having a chat and look, you've obviously expressed that you'd like to sort of get more into the buyer's agency space. Obviously, property is a big passion of yours and it's not your primary job. But you're obviously doing a lot of things in that sort of space in the background. So we've been having a chat and, we've obviously got very busy over the last few months and, really, really proud to say that you've joined us as well for a little while. And, we're hoping to try and mentor and see, just give you that sort of space to get more understanding of what it's like to be a buyer's agent. You've obviously got a lot of experience in acquiring properties and finding the right deals. So really happy to have you on, but that's essentially the next step, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, when we spoke about maybe 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I think you said, there's a lot of clients that you're signing on, and obviously you've been doing this for a few years now. We were already talking about it. I think for me, purely because of the passion, just to educate people out there in terms of, there is not just there is a process to it. There is a bit of madness to it as well. And the world that we're living in right now, it's all about time. People don't have time these days, and actually that doesn't mean that you can't build wealth. There are people out there. You just have to be open enough to go, what, let the professionals handle it. I'm not saying everybody should be, go to a buyer's agent, but it's always time, because by the time you procrastinate and you look 6 months ahead, your market would have moved. You could have probably made $60,000, $70,000 or 10% or whatever it is. And, I've given a few examples where it's at 75% in terms of the growth that we made. But if we didn't time that market, if we didn't get into at the right time, you're missing out on those opportunities. And it's not just for you, it's for your kids. So I think it's very important that you build a team around you. I think you're not alone in this journey. So I think I go to a lot of meetups and, just is always about networking, but again, a lot of people don't have time for this. So I think it's about just educating people, but it's just to take them in this journey to whatever freedom or whatever journey that they want to take, and for generational wealth as well.
Yeah, mate, well said. I've for everyone who's been on this podcast, I don't know anyone who said, "I wish I waited to buy property."
Mm.
More the cases of, "I wish I bought property sooner." So
Yeah.
I think that's a big takeaway. And you're right, building a team is no doubt a vital piece to build wealth in the right way. So again, look, always wish you the success you deserve it, mate. I think, personally speaking, we have some deep chats now and then, and like we alluded to earlier, we've got very similar goals in terms of what we're after in life. And we're quite simple buggers, and
Simple buggers, my son.
yeah, and look, it's I think that the share of property is just a common thing between us, but ultimately, I think the goal in life for both of us is quite similar too. So no doubt we'll we'll keep connecting, and we'll keep chatting until we grow old and all that. But yeah, very, very happy to have you on board with us, and just as a mate. So I really appreciate you coming on today, mate, and sharing your journey. I know at the start, you were a little bit nervous, but now you've look, I can confidently say a lot of buyers will get a lot out of that. So yeah, thanks for sharing your journey.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much for having me, and looking forward to working with you guys.
All right, guys. Well, that's Kumsy signing off. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode, and we'll catch you on the next one. See you guys.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the chat, feel free to drop us a rating on Spotify or wherever you listen. It helps us reach more listeners to help them with their journey. Catch you in the next episode.